Welcome back. I usually like to start with an overview of who I am, which is probably familiar to some of you, so please be patient. Who am I? Impossible for a sociologist to answer simply, but I can give you some fun facts that might help connect us. I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad after growing up in Los Angeles, with my mother described as adding fuel to a fire, and she meant it as a compliment. She was the one who had given me the question authority button and a copy of Howard Zinn, and she worked in social services. I grew up hearing my father, a faculty member at UCLA, championing transit equity as a way to reduce racial and gender inequities. He served as an expert witness for the bus riders union back in the day. My parents were very clear that the most important thing is making a more caring and equitable world. So when I arrived in college, I was proud to be in the first UC freshman class that had no ethnic majority. Diversity and inclusivity were key values my parents and teachers had championed. And we were the optimistic, sure that we were on the road to equity. At UC Berkeley, one arrived without a major and declared at the end of one sophomore year. So I shopped, taking a range of undergrad classes that could be a good fit for my major or would otherwise work for general education. Sociology felt like I finally found a place I fit in. I used to say I always felt like I was looking at the same things as everyone else, but standing much further back. And sociology was a whole bunch of us standing further back. It was also the place that issues of inclusivity, diversity, race, gender, sexuality, and class were being openly discussed. And instead of more simple feel-good answers, I was being given more questions, more problems, more complexity, more challenges. But the lack of clear answers, the complexity, the contradiction, it fits so much better with my experience of the social world than the simple maxims others use to describe social life. And I was hooked. I was lucky enough to take classes from top race, gender, sexuality, and class stratification scholars. People who made sure I understood that there were more questions than answers, and that learning how to answer questions in social and historical context mattered. Being in a race classroom during the original Central Park Five, a gender class from Clarence Thomas and Nita Hill happened, and advocating for consumer safety and sometimes winning and sometimes losing when I was an undergrad really changed how I saw the world. When I applied for graduate school, excited to study culture, inequality, bodies, media, and society, which are not central topics. So when Mike Messner at USC called me after receiving my application to grad school, I was stunned. It felt like winning the lottery. I was going to study with one of my heroes. And with PhD in hand, I soon learned that no one wants to hire a sports sociologist, even with a specialty in gender, race, class, and sexuality in sport. But I was also a research methods specialist, and lots of people want to hire those. I taught all over the country for a few years. Landing a job at Cal Poly Pomona was fantastic. I literally had applied for jobs all over the world and ended up with the one pretty close to where I'd grown up. I've been at Cal Poly Pomona since 2002, and honestly, the main reason it's a great place to work is you guys. The students here are special, and I say that not just to curry your favor, but really, you guys are open, honest, and engaging in a really unique way, and I'm always amazed by your thoughtfulness, your perseverance, and your resilience. So I really want to thank you guys up front. The classes I'm currently teaching are part of a larger project. I took my qualifying exams in culture and mass communication, along with sport and the body, and I earned a graduate certificate in gender studies at the same time. Over time, things like social media, sport, and technology have been of great interest to me, and often there was a shortage of critical scholarship. When social media first came out, I didn't get it. The scholarship I was seeing was all focusing on the positive aspects of identity formation and celebrations of inclusivity. And sure, that's one side of it, but that's not really what I was seeing, because when I started studying social media, it wasn't diverse, and it wasn't even interesting in the ways that I was being told it should be. That audience challenge to systems, I wasn't seeing it. It seemed more like a presentation of self that seemed largely prescriptive, performative, and predictable. Though social media changed how audiences participated, I couldn't help but being reminded of the fireman's wife in Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, saving up for her fourth wall immersive experience in a pre-scripted drama. I'm sure most of you haven't read Fahrenheit 451. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out there as a great book recommendation. Now, as a sociologist, I've read a lot of Foucault, and Foucault challenges us that when history gives you an interpretation of something, try assuming the opposite. So what if all these promises of endless identities and liberatory potentials, where was that? And from the start, the homogeneity of a supposedly diverse space has overwhelmed me. Now, some of the other areas I study, like sports and technology, have been largely critical within the sociological field since its inception, but also marginalized. People often talk about the values of sport or what they learned from sport, but in reality, the reality of competitive sports is highly problematic. We can all recall influential coaches, myself included, and the thing is, that's people. That's not organizations, that's not institutions, that's not systems. We can have great people in a terrible system. And sports studies focuses on systemic critiques and on the problems in sports that arise because of the system itself. And what an amazing moment we are poised in. The thing is, most of us are audiences, whether it's sports or social media or any of the other forms of technology we use to be audiences. And in media studies, there's a simple rule. If you can't identify the product being sold, it's you. And unpacking that is largely what I would really like people to work on over this semester. With what tools should you begin doing this? Critical theory, sociological studies of advertising and consumerism, queer theory, post-colonial theory, Black sociology, Latinx sociology, Asian Am sociology. There's lots of different places that come in with a critical voice. Because you are a valuable consumer. And there's a huge data side of this too. The sheer volume and value of the data that we've been willingly handing over to corporations for years now is something that I don't think we truly understand, both in terms of its direct value, but also its indirect value. And we're only now starting to see the dangers of that. But I always, at some point, slam into a wall. Ursula Le Guin begins The Dispossessed. Yes, I like science fiction literature. I'm very boring. And I'm happy as a boring person reading books. Ursula Le Guin begins The Dispossessed with the line, "There was a wall." And that line has always stuck with me because to some degree I think it really sums up the fundamental problem of ideology. There's always a wall. Ideology will always be there. But you can still be a critical thinker about it. Within this system, I want you to think about your value as a consumer and as a producer, your place in the system, the failures of the system, and your fate within it. The irrationality of rationality of systems designed to perpetuate systems and profit, regardless of lived realities, isn't working well for most of us. Sociology is about sitting with uncomfortable truths. Sometimes we can act, and sometimes these things cannot be immediately addressed. But maybe they can be chipped away at. And at this moment, the foundations of power are in a state of flux. Critical theory, feminist theory, disability rights theory, queer theory, and a host of others are chipping away at the ontological and epistemological foundations of Western thought. Audre Lorde wrote, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And for a long time, I've struggled with this notion of dismantling. But maybe the project doesn't require dismantling. New civilizations are built on the ruins of the old. Cities are abandoned and new ones founded. Maybe we don't need to dismantle anything. Maybe we can abandon the master's house. Maybe we walk away and work together to build something perhaps less coherent, but more inclusive. My classes are about empowerment and praxis, action informed by theory. My goal is for you to leave each course with more of each, a better understanding of how to ask critical questions and to seek engaged answers. More importantly, I want you to believe that you can make a difference. We suffer under the delusion of greatness. Great people, grand gestures. Nothing is accomplished by greatness. Things are accomplished in small, incremental steps. Isaac Newton observed, "If I've seen far, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants." But not only on the shoulders of giants, but on the roads paved by workers, eating food grown in agricultural production, being educated by teachers, being entertained and inspired. Greatness is an amalgamation of effort. No one is great alone. So why the enormous disparity in what we all have? My side gig is educational assessment. I call it my boring project, and I've spent many years working with a wonderful team of psychologists, mechanical engineers, and engineering educators. Also amazing undergrads, and together we've evaluated how small changes to classes in the mechanical engineering department can add up to big changes for students. Right? It was never one great thing or idea. It was never one brilliant intervention. But over the years, in ongoing commitment, small changes add up to small improvements in student performance across the board and across assignments. But guess what? A few more points on each assignment takes a B student to an A and a D student to a C. These little changes aren't just adding up to student success. It's also changing the way we view education. Prioritizing your education, you actually learning ahead of rank ordering your performance and instilling your place, is a major change for education. For those of you who are sociology majors, think about Bourdieu's symbolic violence or Du Bois' double consciousness. It may seem insurmountable to make the kind of change we need. It may seem unachievable. And in the face of what seems overwhelming, the sociologists I have most admired have continued to march and advocate and work for a world centered around the needs of people rather than the needs of capital. Whatever you decide to do, make sure it matters. And if it matters, do something. So that's what I want you to get out of my classes: empowerment. That you are a person who matters and can do more. That the small changes you make can be important. That we can work together to build a different house. One in which we're all valued and we're all given what we need to thrive. Ursula Le Guin wrote, "We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art, and very often in our art, the art of words."